10,000 feet. Part 1, The Long Road North. We left in the middle of the night, that strange hour when even the roads seem half asleep. The air outside was warm and heavy with spring, but our minds were already on the mountains, on the cold air waiting somewhere far ahead, 10,000 feet above us. I'd tried twice before to reach Leavitt Lake, and both times it had turned me away. I told myself this time would be different. It had to be. Karina sat in the passenger seat for the first few hours, her head resting against the window, the reflection of passing streetlights sliding across her face. I drove north through the dark, the hum of the tires and the rhythm of my thoughts sinking into something almost meditative. 8 hours, I'd said, 8 hours to the lake, but fires had closed the main road, and our detour turned that into 10. By the time the eastern edge of the Sierras rose in front of us, dawn was breaking. The kind of dawn that doesn't creep in but arrives, washing the horizon in cold silver light. We stopped for gas in a one-pump station that felt like the last outpost before nowhere. I stretched my legs and looked at the mountains. Even from miles away, they looked impossibly steep, the kind of peaks that make you feel both small and awake. Karina switched seats with me, insisting she'd take over. She'd been up for nearly 25 hours already, but she smiled that stubborn smile and said she could handle it. The Sonora Pass is not a road for the tired. It winds like a serpent along the edge of a cliff, no barrier, no margin for error. One wrong turn and you're part of the canyon below. The road cut back and forth in tight switchbacks, each one revealing a new wall of granite or a dizzying drop. I tried to rest, but each sharp turn or sound of gravel under the tires pulled me back to alertness. Somewhere near the top, the exhaustion caught up to her. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her breath uneven. I reached over, rested a hand on hers, and told her I'd take it from there. She didn't argue. We swapped again, right there on a shoulder barely wide enough for the truck. I remember that stretch clearly. The stillness of dawn over the pass, the thin air, the feeling of climbing above the rest of the world. The peaks looked close enough to touch. Below, the valleys stretched out in folds of shadow and gold. There's something cleansing about mountain light. It burns through whatever noise you brought with you. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun was just starting to warm the granite. The air was cold but calm, the kind of stillness that feels earned after a long road. I stepped out, stretched my back, and looked at the entrance to the trail that led to Leavitt Lake. There was no snow, no sign of winter at all, just a single large round metal gate blocking the road. It wasn't locked in a way I could move, and there was no note, no sign, just a gate and silence. For a long while we stood there looking at it. The world around us was clear and open, the mountains sharp in the morning light, but our path was closed. Behind me, I heard Karina take a long breath and then a short sob. I turned and saw her sitting on the tailgate, hands over her face. Exhaustion had finally found its way through the cracks. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that we'd find a way, but the words caught somewhere between my throat and the cold air. The mountains stood silent, indifferent to our plans. Part 2, Bridgeport and the Low Point. There's a strange kind of silence that follows disappointment, not loud or dramatic, but heavy, like the air right before a storm. That's what filled the truck as I turned us around and started back down the road. The sun was higher now, washing the slopes in pale light, but neither of us said much. The plan, 5 days of camping, kayaking, and quiet at the lake, had come apart before it even began. We drove west down the pass until the forest opened up and the town of Bridgeport appeared in the valley below. I'd never been there before, but from a distance it looked almost picturesque. A cluster of rooftops under open sky framed by tall ridges and the long glint of the river. But as we rolled down into it, that illusion started to fade. The power was out. Traffic lights hung dead over the intersection. Windows were dim, and the few locals moving about did so in that half-speed rhythm of a place caught mid-interruption. The only thing open was a gas station, a small one with a flickering neon sign and gas prices that made my stomach twist. Karina sat quietly beside me, eyes distant, her exhaustion now past words. I pulled into the station anyway. The pump rattled, the numbers climbed, and the smell of fuel drifted through the morning air. Across the road, a cafe sat dark, a hand-painted closed sign on the door. I realized then how long it had been since either of us had eaten. Inside the gas station, the lights buzzed off a generator, and a single clerk stood behind the counter sipping coffee like he'd been awake for days. He nodded as I entered, said something about the outage, then went back to staring at the small battery radio on the shelf behind him. I grabbed 2 breakfast bars, a couple bottles of water, and a coffee that tasted like it had been reheated a dozen times. When I came back outside, Karina was still in the truck, head leaned back, eyes closed. The lines of fatigue around her mouth said enough. I handed her a bar and the water. She smiled weakly, took them, but didn't eat. We sat there for a while, no music, no conversation, just the occasional sound of wind against the side mirror. I could feel the weight of it building, the exhaustion, the disappointment, the long road still stretched behind us. I wanted to keep pushing north to find something that made the drive worth it, but what she needed wasn't more miles. It was rest. So I pulled out my map and started looking for a place we could stay, somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't require us to fight the day anymore. Topaz Lake caught my eye, about an hour north. I remembered hearing it straddled the California-Nevada border, half in one world, half in another. It sounded right somehow, like the kind of place where you could reset your luck. I looked at her and said softly, "Let's head north. We'll find a spot and rest." She nodded, barely awake, and leaned her head against the window again as I pulled us back onto the highway. The road out of Bridgeport felt longer than it was. The sun was high now, glaring off the hood, the light too bright after so little sleep. By the time we reached the sign for Topaz Lake, the landscape had shifted. Less forest, more open space, rolling hills and dry wind. The lake spread out before us, shimmering under a sky that seemed too big. It was beautiful in that strange borderland way, divided perfectly down the middle. The Nevada side was clear and deep blue, the California side, murky and greenish, like 2 different worlds sharing the same water. For a moment, it felt like the trip might still turn itself around. But when we followed the small dirt road down to the marked campsite, it was little more than a patch of dry earth beside the lake. No tables, no trees, no sign of anyone ever staying there, just dust and wind. I turned us around, the feeling of frustration heavier this time. We drove back toward Bridgeport in silence, the road winding through open valleys and stands of pines. About halfway back, a small wooden sign caught my eye, a campground I didn't recognize tucked down a side road that followed the curve of a mountain valley. Something about it felt right. I turned off without saying a word. The dirt road ran beside a river, its water glinting silver through the trees. When the trees opened up, we found a small clearing. Real campsites, a few picnic tables, a stone fire ring, and the sound of the river close enough to hear but not so loud it drowned everything else. I parked and shut off the engine. For a moment, we just sat there. Then Karina smiled faintly and said, "This'll do." I set up camp while she sat near the water, the sunlight catching in her hair. When the tent was done, she climbed inside and I followed a few minutes later. We both fell asleep before I could even think about dinner. When I woke, the light was softer. Evening light, golden and still. I could smell pine and smoke from a distant campfire. She stirred beside me, eyes half open, and for the first time that day, she smiled. That night, we ate quietly beside the river, the sound of the current filling the silence we didn't need to break. I cast a line once or twice into the dark water, not really expecting a bite. I just wanted the sound, the small plunk of the lure, the whisper of line sliding through the air. For the first time in a long while, we weren't moving, and that alone felt like progress. Part 3, the pause before the climb. Morning came soft and pale through the trees, the kind of light that doesn't demand anything from you. For a few minutes, I just lay there, listening to the river. Karina was still asleep, her breathing slow and even, a loose strand of hair pressed against her cheek. Outside, the world felt new, pine smoke lingering in the air, a jay calling from somewhere up the slope. It was the first time since we'd left home that I felt something close to calm. The strain of the last 2 days still lived in my muscles, but underneath it there was a steadiness, the quiet knowing that we'd made it through the worst of it. When she finally stirred, the first thing she did was smile. "You made coffee?" she asked, her voice rough from sleep. I handed her the tin mug, the steam curling up between us. "Didn't make it. Resurrected it," I said. She laughed, low and tired, and that laugh did more for me than the caffeine ever could. We packed slowly, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. The air had that early autumn bite to it, enough to make you grateful for every bit of sunlight that found your shoulders. By the time we rolled out of the campsite, the river glinted like a ribbon of glass beside us, and both of us were quiet in a different way now, not from defeat, but from peace. The road climbed fast once we left the valley. Aspens flared gold along the ridges, their leaves spinning in the wind like coins. Far ahead, the mountains waited, sharp and white-tipped even though it was only September. Leavitt Lake had been an afterthought when I planned the trip. Just a line on a map north of Sonora Pass, 10,000 feet up and surrounded by peaks that still held streaks of snow. After everything else had fallen apart, it suddenly felt like the only place left to go. As we wound higher into the pass, the switchbacks cut back and forth across the rock face. Each turn revealed more sky, more distance. The truck engine hummed in low gear. The air grew thinner, cooler. At a turnout, I stopped to let the brakes breathe, and we stepped out into a view so vast it made my chest ache. Below us, the whole valley opened. Silver rivers threading through dark forest, the line of the highway tracing the land we'd just driven. I watched her stand there at the edge of the overlook, the wind lifting her hair, the sun turning everything gold. There was something unspoken in that moment, that after all the wrong turns, all the dead ends, this was what we'd been climbing toward all along. When we finally reached the turnoff for Leavitt Lake, it felt like a threshold, a simple dirt road that vanished into stone and sky. There was no sign saying it was open or closed, just the large round metal gate stretched across the entrance, no way to pass it. I pulled over, left the engine running, and stared at the gate for a while. The mountain beyond it was breathtaking, the kind of place you can almost feel calling to you. The wind came down cold from the ridgeline and carried that unmistakable alpine smell, granite, water, and something ancient underneath. She looked at me, reading the thought already forming. "You're thinking about hiking it," she said. I nodded, and just to see, we've come this far. She studied the mountain, then me. "All right," she said quietly, "let's go see." We parked near the turnout, packed light, just water, a thermos of coffee, and a couple of sandwiches, and started up the narrow path that ran alongside the gate. It wasn't much of a trail at first, more a mix of gravel and wind-worn rock, but the air was clean, and every breath felt like it was washing the week out of us. By the first bend, the truck was already small behind us. By the second, the world below disappeared entirely. The climb wasn't steep, but it was steady, the kind that makes you earn every foot of it. She moved slow, careful with her steps, and I matched her pace without thinking. Every few minutes we stopped to breathe, to take in the shifting light on the peaks, the long stillness of the alpine air. Somewhere above us, the sound of water echoed, a hidden stream tumbling over stone. It felt like we were walking inside the very silence we'd been chasing since the trip began. 7,000 feet with 10,000 still waiting above us. Part 4, the ascent to Leavitt. When the truck disappeared from view, the world went quiet. The trail ahead wound upward through tall pine and broken stone, thin snow tracing its edges. It was early still, the light soft and silver, the kind that never seems to warm the air no matter how long it stays. We packed light. Too light, maybe. I had my .44 on my hip, cowboy boots already scuffed from the last few days, a long-sleeve shirt and a small backpack with snacks, a filter, and a map folded wrong. Karina had her .40, her hiking shoes, 2 fishing poles slung over one shoulder, and that little box of lures that rattled like wind chimes when she walked. It was enough to feel brave, not enough to be smart. For the first mile, the trail was kind. Dry ground, a few shaded bends, the kind of climb that tricks you into thinking you're stronger than you are. We didn't speak much. The air was thin and the silence between us was steady, companionable. Every few turns, we'd stop to look back at the valley, at the sliver of blue that was Topaz Lake, and I'd think about how far away the world already looked. Somewhere past the second mile, the snow returned, first in patches, then in drifts. The trail started to vanish beneath it, and the wind that had been quiet all morning began to rise, pushing at our shoulders. The air carried that sharp edge that only comes from altitude, the kind that slices through you but somehow feels clean doing it. Each break grew longer. I started walking bent at the waist, one hand on my thigh, the other steadying myself on air. The snow was deep enough now that every step felt like pulling through water. Behind me, I could hear the faint click of the fishing poles, slower now, more careful, each sound spaced by breath and effort. It was a small sound, but it meant she was still there. At some point, I stopped thinking about the lake. It wasn't about reaching it anymore. It was about not letting her down, about making sure all that distance, all those false starts meant something. The snow had gone quiet. No birds, no wind, no sound at all except the crunch of our boots and the slow rhythm of our breathing. Every step forward felt like it was happening somewhere else, in some slower place where time moved differently. There was pain in my ankle, in my back, in the breath that caught too often in my chest, but underneath all that there was calm. We weren't talking anymore. We didn't need to. The silence between us had grown soft, full of understanding. I remember thinking that this, right here, the struggle, the hurt, the shared weight, was what every mile had been leading to. Not the lake, but the lesson in how to keep walking beside someone when everything hurts. Then, without warning, the trees began to thin. The air changed, colder, lighter, and a soft brightness spread ahead of us. We crested a small rise, and suddenly the forest fell away. Mountains stood naked against the sky, snow gleaming under the sun, and between them, a stretch of white that could only be one thing: Leavitt Lake. Part 5, The Frozen Lake. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind moved across the basin in long, low sweeps, carrying the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. The lake stretched out before us, flat and pale, its surface hidden beneath a skin of ice. Snow had drifted over most of it, but in places near the middle, blue light shimmered faintly beneath the crust, like the lake was still breathing, just deeper down. Karina set the poles down in the snow. The sound of them falling was soft, almost swallowed by the wind. I remember how she just stood there, staring at that frozen sheet, her breath visible in small clouds that vanished too quickly. She didn't look disappointed, more reverent, like we'd found something that wasn't meant to be touched, only seen. We didn't move closer right away. Instead, we climbed onto a flat rock above the lake, brushed the snow off, and sat shoulder to shoulder. It was the first time we'd let ourselves rest since the trail had disappeared behind us. Our bottles had run dry hours ago, somewhere after the second river, and our snacks were reduced to a few crushed pieces of trail mix. Still, we sat there and shared what was left. For a while, we just listened. The low moan of wind through the peaks, the faint crack of ice somewhere across the lake, our own breathing slowing back to normal. After a time, I told her I was going down to the waterline. The slope was steeper than it looked, and the snow gave under my boots with each step. At the edge of the lake, I found a patch where the ice had melted back just enough for the water to show through. Dark, clear, impossibly still. I crouched, pulled out the filter, and filled our bottles. The first sip was sharp and cold, cleaner than anything I'd ever tasted. Years of wanting this, and there it was. Leavitt Lake, real, running through me. When I climbed back up, she was sitting where I'd left her, watching the horizon like she was waiting for something to happen. I handed her the bottle. She drank, wiped her mouth with the back of her glove, and smiled faintly. "This was worth it," she said. And she was right, not because it was easy or beautiful or even because we'd made it, but because it had cost us something, because we'd carried each other through it. We sat there a little longer, watching the sun hang just above the peaks, burning gold through the thinning clouds. Eventually, the wind shifted and the cold bit deeper into our clothes. "We should head down before the light goes," she said quietly, as if she didn't want to wake the mountains. We turned back the way we came, following our own footprints until they began to blur with the new snow. The wind rose behind us, erasing what we'd left. By the time we reached the tree line, the lake was gone again, hidden as if it had never been there at all. But it was, and we had seen it. Part 6, The Descent. The sun was dropping fast when we started back. The snow had hardened while we rested, and every step now gave a brittle crunch that carried too far. The light had gone from gold to silver, one of those mountain twilights where everything seems both close and impossibly far away. We didn't talk much. Our bodies had gone quiet, each breath and step becoming its own kind of language. My ankle throbbed, stiff now from the rest, and Karina had fallen into that same focused rhythm I'd seen before, her eyes always scanning ahead, her face unreadable except for the small creases of exhaustion near her mouth. About halfway to the second river, I heard her gasp. When I turned, she was down on one knee, one leg twisted wrong in the snow. The The sound she made was small but sharp. I was beside her in seconds. Her knee had folded inward, already swelling under the fabric of her pants. She bit her lip, angry more than hurt, and waved me off when I tried to help her up. "I've got it," she said, her voice tight. And she did, in a way that only stubbornness allows. We took a few minutes, enough for her to breathe through it, enough for me to swallow the fear rising in my throat, and then we moved on. Our pace slowed, but there was no choice. The air was colder now, and the shadows between the trees felt thicker, darker. By the time we reached the second river, the light was nearly gone. The current had quickened with the melt, black water curling over ice. We didn't talk about it, we just crossed. Boots splashing, jeans soaking to the knee, hands numb and clumsy. On the far bank, we stopped only long enough to look back once. The lake was gone from view, the snow behind us already fading into shadow. We kept moving, slow, silent, each step an act of will. Somewhere between the rivers I heard something, a break in the pattern of wind and trees, a sound that didn't belong. I turned and caught the faintest flicker of movement along the tree line, low and deliberate. Then another. "Keep moving," I said quietly. Karina's head turned just slightly, but she didn't ask. She just started walking faster, the limp almost invisible now, her hand brushing against the grip of her sidearm. My fingers had already found the revolver at my hip. The forest had gone utterly still, except for our footsteps. Every few seconds, there'd be another sound, something shifting in the snow behind us, too slow to be the wind, too heavy to be imagined. The feeling crawled up my spine like static, every instinct screaming that we were being followed. After the third time I heard it, I stopped and turned fully. "Go," I told her. "Don't argue, I'll be right behind you." For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she nodded once and started down the trail. The fishing poles on her pack clicked softly with each hurried step, a sound I focused on like a tether. I backed down the trail after her, revolver in hand, eyes scanning every shadow that moved wrong. The forest never showed its face, just the suggestion of it, there and gone, always at the edge of sight, the kind of presence you can feel in your teeth. After what felt like miles, the sound began to fade. The forest eased back into its ordinary quiet. When I finally turned and started walking forward again, my chest ached from holding my breath. I caught up to Karina near the first river. She was waiting there, eyes wide and unblinking, gun in hand. When she saw me, she lowered it, but neither of us said anything. We just forded that last river as fast as we could, water slapping against our knees, hearts hammering. On the far side, it was as if a switch flipped. The air felt lighter, the tension gone all at once. I holstered the revolver. She exhaled and gave a small, disbelieving laugh. And then we smiled. Not the kind that comes from relief, but the kind that comes when you've walked through something you can't quite name, and somehow come out together. The snow thinned, the trail reappeared, and the truck came into view like a promise. We didn't run. We didn't need to. We'd already done the running. Part 7, the evening after. By the time we rolled back into camp, the last light was gone from the mountains. The sky was a dark, heavy blue, the kind that means the temperature is about to drop fast. I shut off the engine, and for a long time we just sat there, neither of us saying a word. The sound of the cooling metal from the hood ticked softly into the quiet. Karina leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, her face pale from exhaustion. I could still see the faint tremble in her hands. My own fingers hurt from how tightly I'd been gripping the wheel the last few miles. We didn't need to speak. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd just lived through. Eventually, we got out and started dinner. The motions were automatic, slow. I built the fire while she unpacked the food, her limp visible only when she thought I wasn't watching. Every spark that caught felt like a small victory. When the flames finally took, they lit the trees in gold and orange, and the world felt warm again for the first time all day. We ate in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything. The meal wasn't much, just what we had left. But it might have been the best food I'd ever tasted. She sat close enough that our shoulders touched. Every so often she'd glance toward the dark edge of the forest where the sound had followed us. But nothing stirred there, not a whisper, just the river moving somewhere out in the dark. After a while, she said, "You think it was a bear?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe the mountain just wanted to make sure we knew who it belonged to." That got a quiet laugh out of her. It wasn't much, but it felt good to hear. When the fire burned low, she leaned against me, the fishing poles stacked nearby, still dusted with snow. The stars came out sharp and cold, and the night wrapped around us in that familiar way the mountains do, vast, heavy, but somehow protective. We didn't talk about the gate, or the pain, or the thing in the trees. We didn't talk about how close we came to quitting. We didn't have to. Sometimes the story isn't about catching the fish or reaching the perfect campsite. Sometimes it's about the quiet after, the moment when you realize the hardest part is over and you're still there, still side by side. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of her breathing beside me and the river running through the valley, both steady and real. The kind of sounds that mean you've made it through. No rest is as good as that earned. Thank you for making it to the end, 5 years in the making, only to have this adventure. You never know what life will bring, and in the end, the plans falling apart led to the best vacation of my life. Nothing planned, everything earned and enjoyed. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as always, have a wonderful day.